we want to have a conversation on AI governance. It's not usually a conversation that brings the tech community, usually it's a policy community, but today we're doing something differently, and for that I thank the Indaba community for that. Because we want to see how we can truly be Urunana hand in hand, working together between practice and working with policy, working with industry, working with researchers to ensure that we have an AI for Africa that represents us all. So to start us off, I want to also paint a picture through the research that I have been part of. So I want to ask the team to put the slide that we had shared that tries to show us how exactly AI governance looks in the African continent. We have about 55 countries. Before when we go to the next slide, I want to ask, how many have an idea of how many AI policies or strategies do we have in the continent? How many countries have developed one? Can I hear any numbers? 7? How many did I hear? Okay, this is a tough crowd. I know it's the last meeting, but we are yet a nascent, we are a very nascent region. So we have about 16 countries. And the work that we're doing is tracking these policies. So if you look at me, if you look at that, please feel free to track that. It takes you to the tracker itself. So what we have done is to collect the data in all these different countries. We have the one by the Africa Union, Smart Africa at the continental level, and then we have 16 African countries. And what we're doing is putting them all together for you to be aware of how policy is emerging in this continent. As I said, we have 16 policies. Next slide, please. And this is how they look across the continent. The dark blue is countries that have fulfilled or have published these policies. And the light blue are countries that are in the process. I think the most recent that I saw that have been published is by Lesotho and Tanzania. They're in draft form. And then we have the grayed out. We don't have any data yet. We believe they're still processing them, but they're yet to be published by their government. So this gives you an understanding of where we are today. So all these countries, there's an imperative that we need to drive an AI policy conversation because it gives us a vision and the direction for our country. It identifies the key areas whereby we need to invest in infrastructure, like what we heard from Her Excellency. We need now also to move from blueprints, PowerPoints, into actualizing the agenda of AI. And that helps me move to the next stage of our presentation, of which I think I'm going to take a seat, as I want to now move to the panelists for this session. All right. So to begin this session, I would like to bring in our panelists. I would like to begin with Dr. Barbara Glover, who is a leading expert at the African Union, NEPAD, and she has been instrumental in shaping this scene. She was part of the team that worked on the white paper that led to the continental strategy. So for this session, panelists, I'm going to request that you can give us 2-3 minutes, tell us a little bit about yourself, why AI governance is so important, and just give us some key highlights of AI governance in Africa. Starting with you, Dr. Glover.
Thank you. Thank you for a warm introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara Glover. I work for the African Union Development Agency, and my cliche introduction is to always say that we are the UNDP for Africa. So we implement priority projects for the African Union, usually in a pilot approach that we then translate into sustainable projects in the countries. Within the AI space, we have worked a lot on innovative policy making. And what I mean by this is to sort of move away from the status quo when it comes to policy making, ensuring that the right actors are in the room and the ecosystem is being fully leveraged when we are looking at policy. For instance, our white paper that Jane has touched on is over a 200-page document, and it had actors from the AI ecosystem across the continent. Some of them are in the room today, that looked at AI in various sectors that I'll be touching on in the subsequent submissions, but it's to ensure that in the policy space we are reflecting your voices as innovators, as people who want to ensure that artificial intelligence benefits the continent more comprehensively. And we are doing this through pilot implementation using the pillars that you can see on the screen, the various sectors that we are looking at. The first pillar on human capital and development. We are also looking at data, the data ecosystem. We are looking at regulatory systems, and what is it that we can do before regulations or policies are in place? What are the open platforms that we can utilize? We are also looking at the partnership ecosystem, and then also defining the AI economy, because if you go to a policymaker and you're talking about artificial intelligence, yes, it's nice, it's exciting, but to the policymaker, what is it that is going to, for instance, give him more votes at the next election? What is it that he's going to tell his electorate, for instance? So how do you convince them that AI is something that you should be looking at both in the short term and then in the long term? And then, of course, we are also looking at the effective monitoring and evaluation systems, like Jane mentioned, for instance, the platform to look at what are the policies that are existing on the continent. Those are some of the strategies that we want to incorporate into policy implementation to ensure that the relevant information is fed to our policy and decision makers.
Thank you very much. Now to you, Professor Virginia, for your 2-3 minutes introduction, please.
Hi, thank you very much, and it's my pleasure to be here. I just want to start by saying boa tarde to all the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, that it seems to be forgotten all the time, but I know that you are there, so boa tarde. Anyway, going back to the issue of AI policy. One of the things that we notice more and more when we hear about AI in the news or in the conversations is that people start speaking about AI as we speak about the weather. It happens. We don't really know where it comes from, who is dealing with it, how to address it. It just happens. It's there. It's like the weather. We don't really know how to control it, but the only thing we know is how to protect or how to benefit from the weather. AI is not the weather, and policy is the instrument that we have to address exactly the implications, not only after AI is there and the only thing we can do is to take it or leave it, but mostly to address the way that AI is being developed, is being decided, is being developed, is being deployed, is being governed, and there we need to talk about policies. Policies is much more than just regulation. It's about many different ways to address the saying that we want to have over the development of these systems. I think that we will follow on many of these issues. I have been involved with policy development, firstly at European level. I was involved in the development of the first guidelines for trustworthy AI in Europe. And since a couple of years, I have been involved more and more with international organizations, from the high-level advisory body on AI to the Secretary General of the United Nations, to the work being done by the UNESCO and by UNICEF. I see, and I was very happy to hear the words from in the video, Africa is really taking a leading role. I was recently in an AI summit in Bangkok, organized by UNESCO, and really the countries who were there, who were taking the discussions, leading the discussions, moving forward, are the African countries. So I think that we can learn a lot from the initiatives that are happening here, and I think mostly that we need all together, Urunama, like you say, but not only in Africa, but all over, we need to start really addressing policy not only as something that happens to us, like AI, but really as something that we have in our hands to decide. It's also not that policy is something that is set in stone. We have kind of the idea that once the regulations come, they are there and they are fixed. We also need to understand how to build, how to change, how to adapt policies to what we are doing. And maybe just going to the slide that you are looking at, it was not really meant now. I want to just refer to it at the end. But the research group that I lead in Sweden, the AI Policy Lab, is starting a series of externships. This is the same as internships, but you do it remotely. So if you are interested in knowing more about how to deal with policy, how to design policy, how to combine your own computational and scientific research and studies with the ways that policy is happening, learning how to talk to policymakers, how to understand the needs of policymakers, I welcome you to register to this. It will be a 6 months internship in the distance, so externship, but we will offer a lot of possibilities to learn more about what does it mean to really do policy in AI.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a very interesting program, and I hope people will take advantage of the opportunity. Thank you, Virginia, and thank you, Barbara. And now to Professor Vukosi for your 2 minutes remark. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm Vukosi Marivate. I take myself as a community builder of AI on the African continent, first and foremost. And my personal mission is how do we give agency to Africans throughout this AI revolution, and that's going back over the last decade or 2 decades. It's not now, it's not driven by Gen AI. Outside that, my main job, I'm a professor of computer science, the chair of data science at the University of Pretoria, where I run the data science for social impact lab or research group, where mostly now we work on African languages and natural language processing, while also thinking about data science and society. And the reason we looked at data science and and society is what are these things that you need to enable that data science AI actually is useful for people. It is not simply the computing, and I think that's the reason I'm also on this panel. It's not simply the computing, but there's all these other human factors that come down to our values, the way that we interact, the way that we want machines to interact with us. I'm very lucky in this case to be one of the co-founders of the Deep Learning Indaba, going back to 2016, and then also being there at the beginning of Masakane, which has become a global phenomena in how you do research in a participatory manner across institutions and really look at problems in natural language processing. But maybe to explain in some ways my reduced activity within the Indaba and Masakane has been, once I was invited by Barbara to help out with the white paper for AI, it became very clear to me that more of us in the technical space have to spend time in the policy space as well. So taking that time to really engage with policymakers, to learn and to teach. To learn because you have to learn how actually you get from the values, the things that we would like as norms, as practitioners, to actually get in as actually inputs that also drive what the policy-making spaces are. At the same time, what we also do want is for policymakers to have an opportunity to be here, to engage with us and also learn on their side. So this is one of the proudest moments I think I've been at the Indaba, because I'm very happy that we were able to get the panelists that are here, the African Union, many other people who are looking at policy from across the continent to actually come and visit us. And it is unfortunate that the Commissioner Lerato Matabuhe couldn't be here, but we were amazed by the video that she created. I'm sorry, it was something else when we first saw it a couple of minutes ago. So I'm hoping really that we understand that and we really continue engaging. And I hope also through this panel, people also get to appreciate both sides of this area. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you with a follow-up question, but I want to turn back to the crowd. I hope this time they'll be a bit better to me. I want to find out how many of you in your national capacities even in the international community have interacted with the development of an AI policy. If your country has put out a policy or strategy, you've given your comment. If I can just see a show of hands. Oh, that's great. Oh, perfect. This is good. So we are not starting from scratch. Thank you for those who put up your hands. Why am I asking this question? I think there is a challenge that is has come to the floor in these conversations, that we need to ensure that we are bridging the gap. I think the message of Urunana, hand in hand, is critical in the policy space. And for you, when policymakers are making these decisions, previously I was a policymaker in the government of Kenya. We used to make this AI policy and technology. We always used to go out and ask for inputs. I know sometimes you feel like it doesn't really matter, but it does. Because stakeholder input is extremely important, and especially when it's coming from practitioners. But before we go further into how to engage into that, I want to come back to you, Vukosi. As a leading voice in this space, you have worked in the intersection of AI research and policy. And right now, you're one of the leading voices. So how can we continue to ensure that the African voice is better represented in the policy space locally, and also in the global levels, to ensure that our voices continue to be expressed? Because we are seeing a lot of global AI conversations happening, and I'm not quite sure yet if Africa is still fully being heard within these places.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a few levels here. So one is that Africans should tell their stories. If we're not telling their stories about what is going on here in other places, we're looking like, for example, at the moment, the G20 processes are very heavily going on, and we will have declarations that have to do with artificial intelligence as part of the G20 outputs. We must be forceful to make sure our voice actually comes out very clearly in this. So even for you, tell people when you go home about this place called the Deep Learning Indaba and what you've learned and how you're there. Tell people about the networks, the communities that you represent in your countries, and be very proud of doing that. Let us not keep quiet because we're feeling whether it's shy or maybe we're being boastful. Because if we don't tell our stories, other people will. And unfortunately, in those stories, other people will be the heroes, and then we will just have been passive in this thing, and it is not so. It's a very important piece. The second one connected to that that I've seen is because of these stories not being told, there's always this feeling, and I think the AI policies as they currently are, in some cases you get into a situation where people are almost describing in places maybe like Africa and South America that, oh, this continent just discovered there's this technology, and they have to catch up. And that is a thing we should ruthlessly reject. And it is something where, you know, sometimes, what's the way to that? People now maybe come into a room like this and they can't, their mental model of what they're supposed to see doesn't match. And you see this also in the spaces. I'm not going to pick out and say it's only policy spaces, but that's true. You get to a policy space where you go in and say like, yeah, well, I decided that I wanted to work on AI in 2005, and I started working on AI. And it's like, an African who does AI, that doesn't match. Like, you know, what does that make any sense? And that's the thing of like, what did you expect? Like, did you think that there's no way? And this brings up in saying now, if you're not in the rooms, if you don't have a voice, it seems that other people then are deciding and saying, because everything is tabula rasa, in Africa nobody knows about this, we're going to now come up with strategies or plans that always say, we're starting again, we're starting again, we're starting again. And what we should be doing is, yes, it's one thing to be on the sidelines and then complain about it and shrug and say, oh, those people don't know. It's another to say, some of us have to spend time in those spaces making sure that people understand this so that they can really understand what are the needs of this community, what are the needs of the people who are practical, who are the needs of the people who are doing regulation, what are the needs of all those things, and then we build forward. Lastly, I think one of the things that now is going on, so my other hat that I have to say, so now being a startup founder, being at Lelapa AI, is also seeing that there's also these other pieces of, finally, you want to build a product. It needs to get into the spaces, into the hands of people. Where does regulation come in, and how do people understand this? Yes, it's very easy if you're not in the room, that's something to come along that then doesn't recognize the challenges that an African company who are based in Africa might have that then a European or a North American company doesn't see as a challenge, because they can just go like, oh, we're not in your country. We can work like remotely, and you then have to then. So this is something that becomes very clear that again, but the message is talk. Yes, we are all those scientists who just like want to just sit with your work, but then very, very open to sharing your journey and your stories. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that deserves an applause. Thank you. Talk. Thank you. So the next question then, I think I want to pick up on what Vukosi said, especially as a challenge for us to share our voices. And looking over at the Africa Union, I know you are at NEPAD and you're the agency, the implementation side. So I'm really interested to hear, or if you can share with us how NEPAD is looking at this, the implementation side of policy strategy implementation, and also about the harmonization of ensuring that we are all speaking from one voice.
Thank you, Jane. I think, so maybe I can start with a personal perspective. I came from the University of Pretoria. I did my PhD at the University of Pretoria. So I came in as a scientist and went straight into a policy field. And it took a lot of learning, relearning, and adjustment to be able to work in that policy space. And one thing that we have realized is that sometimes the inputs or the great ideas that are coming from the technical community isn't translated to policies just because of the way the document is presented or the information is presented. So at the African Union Development Agency, we have, for instance, what we call the Calestos Juma Executive Dialogues, where we are training technical people on how to engage policymakers, and also training the policymakers on how to understand some of the technical outputs that are out there, whether it be publications, and also bringing them into the room. So facilitating that coordination at the ecosystem level to bridge that gap. You would notice, for instance, in some of the policy implementation initiatives is that a minister goes and gets a contract and pilots a new program and gets in external people to come do the thing. Sometimes genuinely they don't even know that they have the expertise in their countries. And so they just jump onto whichever person externally has come in to propose a new idea, whether it's a new tool that should be implemented. And so we are also sort of playing an advocacy role, getting our policymakers to understand that, look, there's great talent out there. There are people that are doing great things. When I got to know Vukosi, for instance, I've become a good advocate for deep learning in Durban. And I always say it when we are in meetings at the UN General Assembly and even at the African Union level, that there's a great community of AI and machine learning experts on the continent. We are not starting from scratch. You should use them. You should tap into that resource. And so what we are working at more and more is just to bridge that gap, get our policymakers to understand what's happening on the ground, and also get our scientists and technocrats to understand that the policymaker is not going to go to your scientific journal or conference proceeding to read what you published, even though it's great. So how do you translate that into bite-sized approaches that would inform policymaking, and then bringing you into the room, into those discussions, so that we can generate more informed policies that would help to transform the continent.
Thank you very much. And I think it's very encouraging to hear what is going and how you're approaching this. Dr. Glover, Virginia, Professor Virginia, coming to you. But before I come to you, I also want to highlight that we do really want to have an interaction session here. And after this, I would also want to turn to the audience. If you have questions, I would request that you prepare your questions. I hope we have some roving mics that we can use. I see a nod, thank you. So before we go to that, I want to ask Professor Virginia. You spoke about some of the work that you've done in the international scenes with the UN, with the EU, and then also hearing what others have said, that sometimes the African voice is not really represented in this. Tell us a little bit, what are some of the efforts that are being done within these policy circles? Because we know the global policy circles do influence us here. We don't want to be shaped for others who don't really understand our nuances. So what are some of the insights that you can bring and you've been able to share as you participate in these areas?
Thank you very much. And indeed, it is always difficult to listen to the voices that are not speaking enough. And in many of these type of organizations, there are always some that are louder than others. But that doesn't mean that the ones that are more loud are the ones who are the most relevant to be listened. I think that work that was like what has been done by UNESCO or by UNICEF, really starting by understanding that even though we do want to have some type of global basic agreement on what should we be doing in terms of developing that is responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and so on. So that there should be across the globe, for Africa and wherever else, we need to have a kind of a basic understanding of what does it mean. What is responsible, what is inclusive, what is fair, how do we address this type of issues. But having said that, doesn't mean that there should be a one-size-fits-all. And because sometimes those that are louder or are bigger, they try to, and it's not only with Africa, I think that at this moment in Europe where we're experiencing the same type of domination and lack of sovereignty over our own development in AI, our own ways of developing, because there are those much bigger, and those much bigger, which I don't need to name, are not necessarily nations. They are more and more organizations, companies, private companies that are above the nations, above the governance, above the democratic instruments that we have to govern those issues. So I think that at this moment, we all together, wherever we are in the world, need to be much more voiceful about our need to take in our own hands the AI, the technology that is relevant for our own contexts. I see a lot of similarities, for example, from the north of Sweden, where I live nowadays, and things that are happening here in Africa. Like I say, the European governments are struggling as much as the African Union to create a space in which we can set up our own regulations, our own policies, our own space. And regulations and policies are not necessarily just about telling what is not allowed. It's mostly telling us what are the incentives, the conditions, what are the contexts in which we want to see the AI that benefits our own society, our own people, our own values and our own hopes. So I think that we need to be much more voiceful. I believe that international organizations like United Nations, UNESCO, UNICEF, but also the G20 or the World Economic Forum are places in which more and more people are looking at Africa, at the Global South, as the ones which are able to provide the novel ideas, the new things, the new approaches, the things that have not been again and again tried and failed in the North. So I think that it's very important and very encouraging, and I really would like to encourage all of you, especially the ones like most of you, I believe, are working on the more technical side of things, are studying computer science, information systems, data science, and all of that. Try to talk with the ones that are not only making the policies, but the ones that are experience the impact and the results of what we are doing. Without understanding why AI is beneficial, who is benefiting from AI, it's very difficult to really developing the techniques, the solutions, the approaches, the algorithms that really benefit all of us.
Yes, Vukosi.
You inspired me to say something here, Virginia. So one of the things that's been very interesting over the last, I think, years or so, I just want to give a practical example about people being very loud in this space. And I've seen this in some of the G20 processes. We had the Global AI Summit on Africa here in April, and I did speak at it today at the Partnership on AI breakfast. So I also, because of the policy-making part, I joined the board of Partnership on AI last year to really continue this journey, and I've also sat on the steering committee of the Lacuna Fund. So one of the things in terms of now the technical researchers to understand, again, in terms of we have these values, you're going to have policy, you're going to have regulation, and then norms. These are things that come from us. They don't come from the sky and then are given and then are told that, so they come from us. So one of the lessons that still has to be maybe codified and learned from the Lacuna Fund, for example, was the community. So the Lacuna Fund, for people who don't know, it was a fund that was set up to fund the creation of data that's used in AI. And the thing that happened is that initially, we had a policy that said you must release your data under an open license, being either like CC BY or kind of lower. So CC BY, it's like it's a Creative Commons, and you must acknowledge who, attribute where you got that data. The communities came back to us, right, after a while, and said like, we're creating the data. Right, and this is like, and generally pre-LLMs making it into the space. We're creating the data, but the people who are getting a lot of the prestige and the recognition for the work are the people who then take our data, go and build a model, and then we do not have the resources to go build the models. And the Lacuna Fund, by our, how we were set up, was only funding just the data set creation. So through that process, we spent, I think, 18 months debating, discussing what is it that we're going to do. We were lucky that on the side, a process that was kicked off by Masakane getting into a situation with a newspaper, that we had now approached law scholars in Africa to say, what do we do and how do we navigate content in those spaces? And the one thing that came out was this thinking about equitable licensing. How do we do licensing in such a way that it balances between the needs of the communities who have to create, they're creating resources, at the same time, make sure that they are part of the conversations about how we're going to go forward. And now, which is very, the interesting part is that there are some loud voices that then say, please do not talk about sovereignty. Do not talk about because on their side, it's not that, oh, this is not worth doing. Because again, as I said, the norms, the values, all of those come from the community. And the community is telling us that this is our need and we need this. And now it's like, no, let's not discuss this because the only way is only that way. As Virginia was saying, as people are trying to go, there's only one universal truth, but it's not. It is contextual. It comes from the people. So equitable license discussions have to go on. Yes, Africa now, we have the Noodle license, NOODL, that comes from CIPIT at Strathmore and at University of Pretoria. Lelapa, again, my conflict, we created the ExpThis framework, and there's another license there. And we implore all researchers to explore these options. Explore and check and see if they are fit for purpose for you, right? It should not be taken as a universal. There is no such thing. There are questions we are being asked, and that's how you get to policy, right? You get to those things of saying that. For me, I will state the chair. I was going to state it at Friday at the Natural Language Processing or the Voices workshop. Our lab has now made a decision that we default to Noodle first. And then we move to something else because that is what we believe that the people that we're serving have asked us, and they've made their voices very clear. And at the Lelapa, for our community work and community data sets, you will see them being under ExpThis.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Yes, thank you. I think it's important to understand the background that happens. I was involved in a similar conversation when the norms of how compute infrastructure was being given to Africa. We're being given access to and not built in a continent. So these are some of the background conversations that make sure that let's give people options if you want resources here or if you want to connect to other resources. But I think I also want to take a pause here and see if there are any burning questions from the audience. If there's anybody who has a question, I see one. I see two on this side. That if we can have the microphone, I don't know. I have a microphone here, so, oh, there's someone on the floor. If there are two ladies on this side, please, that I see, if we can take those two. Please state your name where you're from and be very precise in your question. And if you want to address it to somebody in particular, you can do that. If not, we'll address it all. Thank you. Go ahead. If you can stand, please.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Bumi Akiremi, and I'm from Nigeria. So my question is, I'm a fresh graduate, and I am skilled in like the technical part of AI. And recently, I started reading a lot about policy and AI policy. And I got like super curious because in one of my research, I kept asking myself questions like, why is it that waste management in Nigeria, for example, is still a prevalent issue despite the fact that there is a lot of investment? And I realized that policy has like a major role in this. It's like as if it's either the government, I don't know, maybe the government doesn't know what policy to implement or how to go about it. So my question is like, how do I get actively involved in these kind of conversations? Like I have interest in it, but it's like I don't really know how to get started and how, you talk a lot about making your voice heard. Like how do I get my voice to be heard? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Sorry, there's a big echo. It's a bit hard.
Difficult for us.
Yeah,
to
for us to hear. So if you can.
Because you help me.
Yeah.
It seems you want to know how to get actively involved.
Yeah.
I think by asking that, you are already actively involved, and keeping asking those things and keeping asking about why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I developing AI just because everybody else is doing it? Or am I developing AI because I want to solve some type of fundamental research issue or some very practical societal issue? Asking yourself this type of questions is already forming yourself to become someone involved in policy. And policies are not always made at the government level or not always made in the United Nations or whatever. They start by ourselves, the way we present our work, the way we interact with each other, the way we move forward from what we are learning or studying or developing to the way that we are going to operationalize or to bring it forward to other ones. We can start very small with the other ones and try to find like-minded voices, people around you that are as interested in discussing this type of issues as you are, and create just some kind of a discussion group and talk about what are we doing, is that what we're doing, what is relevant for our country, for our society, for our city, for whatever. How can we talk with other ones, and then creating a little bit like ripples in the water, moving from these small ways of talking to each other, then interacting with other ones, maybe in your university or in your city or in your country. And in that way, you will become a much valuable voice, because not only you are asking yourself those important questions, but you are also at the same time developing the skills which will address how to operationalize those questions. 99% of policies and regulations end up somewhere in the cupboard of your government, and no one ever reads those papers again. The capability of asking the questions and also addressing the operationalization makes you the 1% that really is going to make the difference.
Thank you. If we can go to there's a lady also here. If we can take maybe 2 or 3 questions before we answer, I think that, so I think, yes, you have the microphone.
Good evening. I'm Rashidat Ibrahim from Nigeria. I'm a PhD student of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. I'm researching on artificial intelligence, academic integrity, and institutional ethical practices in public universities in Nigeria. What actually brought about this research topic is that while helping my professors and dealing with the undergraduate research projects and assessment, I realized that whenever they are submitting, if you ask, okay, this is what you submit as your response, and you flip through it, you see that, okay, this is awesome. Then you ask question, you will see that there is no relationship between what the person is telling you and what is inside the book. Okay, this brought about in the next 5 years, what is university going to be producing? Are we going to be producing employable graduates? The research they are writing with generative AI, this research are knowledge-based, which is going to inform the knowledge to be based on in the next future. If the data used is being generated, is falsified, are we going to be producing fake knowledge in the society? Then what will happen to employment rates? What will happen to skill mismatch? Since higher education institution is meant to bridge both unemployment rate and skill mismatch in our society, and they are to produce innovations in our society in order to, and these are used to grade the academic integrity of institutions. Okay, then during the course of researching this, my university brought about a regulation on AI percentage in your research work, which is 10%. There is this study paddy that was introduced to the undergraduates. Unfortunately, some of them are not using it. And this AI detective, which is Turnitin, unfortunately, it also picks some people's writing styles as AI-generated work, which is very, very unfortunate, or which means that it is not reliable enough to be used as AI detector. How do we come out of all this mess? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I got a couple of this, and I think I would put that to Vukosi and
I'll make notes. Do you have another question?
Yes. Do you have another question on the floor? If you can try also and be short and quick to the point. There's a gentleman. I don't see. Oh, there's 3 questions. So let's take these 3. If we can just try and be very short, and then we'll answer those 4. If you can have your hand raised so we can identify you, please. We can start with the lady with white, and then the 2. Yeah.
Okay. Can I go ahead?
Where? Please go ahead. I don't see.
Okay. My name is Yassine from Zambia. The question I want to ask is, so today there was a report that came out. Obviously, it was just highlighting companies that have kind of like come up with AI strategies, and Zambia being among those countries. And well, as a Zambian, we're not involved in the process of developing that strategy. What we just saw was a situation where government came up with something, and then there was suddenly a launch of the strategy. So my question is, should we be importing strategies? Because from the information that I have, this strategy that we have is something that was adopted from elsewhere. So, so obviously, the conversation is around localization. So should we be adopting these policies? Should we be just adopting strategies from elsewhere and then bringing them and then obviously trying to adapt them? Or should we start from scratch so that then it resonates with what we are doing as a country? Thank you.
Very much for that question from Zambia. Barbara, if you could take that question, please. I hope you have read it.
Okay, one more.
Yes, if you can take those 2 right there.
My name is Amina Salifu from Ghana. So recently, Ghana drafted a policy. They came up with a policy to govern AI as a whole. But I heard that in one of the professor's speech, he did mention that Africa has a policy, if I get you right. So now we have different norms and then different values within different countries. The African policy that you are talking about, is it just for a specific country as African policy? Or is it for, does it capture all African countries? Thank you.
Very much. I think that's also a good question for Dr. Glover to answer, but yes, let's wait for the last one, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Adiza Al-Hassan from Ghana. So my question is about data sets. So I think about 100% of the room would agree with me with the data set issues when it comes to creating models or solving problems in the African context. My question goes to Barbara. I want to know what are the strategies that AU is doing in this aspect, because I'll tell you 100% of most of African countries, we have the data, but just that is the access to the data that is the issue. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for those questions. I think we'll stop there for now. We have about 10 more minutes. So I'll ask us to see how many questions you can answer, but I'll start maybe trying to answer the question that was asked about the difference between the AI continental strategy and the one that has been published, I believe you said in Ghana. So first and foremost, as I had mentioned earlier, we do have a dual process of doing AI policies and strategies in the continent. And Dr. Barbara will talk about it. The Africa Union has a process of doing that. And that is endorsed by all 55 countries because every country within the African continent is a member. So they send their members and their ministers of ICT endorse it. When that comes into force, then it is adopted by the national countries. Then nationally, there's a process of how countries develop their own strategies and policies. By law, the Ministry of ICT or in collaboration with other ministries, they will develop that. In principle, they are supposed to be harmonized to ensure they're speaking to each other, but some processes start before the others. So sometimes there could be a dichotomy, there could be diverse views, but at the end of the day, both documents do speak to the country. One is localized for implementation, because like the AU Continental Strategy, I really encourage all of you to read that document. It has multiple recommendations of how we can implement AI for the continent. And so the national strategies should capture that. So let me start to my far left, and then we'll come this way. Dr. Barbara.
Thank you very much for the really interesting questions. So I'm starting with a question on why it looks like we imported a continental strategy from outside. I am concerned that if I give you the right answer, I will not have a job by the time the endeavor ends. So I can see you backstage to tell you what happened. But I would encourage you to look out for the ADNF Continental White Paper. That was developed by Africans for Africans, and it gives you a very detailed overview of what's happening on the continent and what we are thinking about, what we collaboratively thought about as the various experts from the continent on artificial intelligence. Vukosi was one of the experts that drafted that white paper, and we had key experts. We had regional consultations. We brought together the ministers, and then they went through that process. The current continental strategy also was validated by the ministries of ICT of all the 55 countries. So maybe tapping onto the next question. So it wasn't just a document that was just released. There was a drafting process. There was a series of meetings that were held where the ministers, through their technocrats in the ministries of ICT, came together and refined that document. But that's as far as I can speak to it. In terms of the data set discussions, yes, we do have quite a number of initiatives. I think usually the challenge is that most people are not aware of what's happening, and only a few countries seem to benefit from some of the initiatives at the AU level, but there are quite a number of initiatives. We have the AU Data Policy Framework, and in implementing that, there are a number of programs that are ongoing that support some of these data access and equitable access. We have what we call the African Science, Technology, and Innovation Indicators Program, where we train the data experts in the various countries. We have a series of trainings for them. We even take them we have a partnership with Lund University where we take them for 3 months training on some of these, how to effectively collect data, clean up data, make sure that you have the right data sets. And next year we are moving on to University of Pretoria to offer that because we want the training to come from the continent. So there are actually quite a number of initiatives. And then the last question on how you can be actively part of policy making. There are a number of initiatives. You can, for instance, join the AU Volunteers Network, Young Volunteers Network, where we introduce you to policy making, get you to understand what that implies, and then helps you to shape out your future, even if you're going to go back into research or academia, on what the policy space looks like. But for the interest of time, I think I'll wrap up here. Thank you.
Thank you. Vukosi.
Okay. So maybe I'll go back to the data sets one and touch base, and then go back to the responsible use, responsible AI use, especially in higher education. So on the data set side, on top of, I think Barbara was giving instruments. I now use these words.
Policy.
Yeah. So it's saying like, the instruments that are official. But another part that we're trying to get to is to get to a right to research being something that is inculcated in those spaces. So I think the thing that maybe you're not saying is that, look, you might have data, let's say, that's created by governments in your country, or is available, and then that data, you find that it's very hidden, it's restricted in all of these things, or there might be data that even comes from private organizations. You see it, but you are afraid that if you use it, somebody will come and give you a fine or all those things. So there is a big movement across the continent to say, researchers are trying to study us, trying to give us information that, we can be better, we can advance as society. Give them that right. As long as they are responsible, they're ethical, they must get access to that data and use it. Yes, it is not saying, it's just available for free and people can go on and use it for commercial purposes without. We're saying there will be the values that people will have and say, like, we expect that if it's data that is created by government, the citizens must have access to use it for A, B, or C, but not for D and E. At the moment, that is not a universal thing. It's a very interesting, South Africa is going through, at the moment, a copyright amendment bill, and even our lab at the university has joined action to listen to what is going on at our constitutional court, right? Because we are trying to say, as AI researchers, we are also interested in what the outcome is going to be of that bill. Once that bill is sorted, South Africa should have something that is akin to fair use. For a lot of people here, you might think, fair use, because you're hearing it from an American lens. Your country might not have fair use, right? And that is a challenge, right? You might not have fair use, so you can't just take data and use it, even if you're using it for research or critique or whatever. It must be something that the community comes together or society comes together and says, this is the values that we have in the creation of content. And at the moment, we are in flux. Tomorrow I'm doing a recording for a keynote for journalists at a big journal on trying to get them to understand, especially African journalists, what's useful in language and how language engages with media and journalism, but then some of the challenges that we're facing, because a lot of media houses are starting to close down access to their content because of what has been happening, not in Africa necessarily, but other places of people using their content. And now, for some languages, we can't do research, right? And this is becoming a bigger and bigger challenge. So it is a big thing. Data flows are things that, again, make your voice heard. Talk about it. Tell that you are having this problem. Don't keep quiet, because then when the policymakers are now making these amendments or these changes, they don't hear the challenges that are being faced. On the side of the responsible use, it's a big thing. I think higher education, basic education, lower, are going through the emotions at the moment, or the motions of these things. There will be changes both in the teaching and the learning. It's just that at the moment, it's almost like, the technology went further than us being expecting of what the changes were going to be. And that's also another thing you here in the room can be very impactful of. Like for the people who are working on language models, on AI, explain them to people. Explain how they work, what they're doing, how they think. And at the same time, there'll be a lot of questions on how do we change the way we teach? How do we change the way we assess? And then also for people, look, this is how learning happens. It's become a very important thing of this is how learning happens, and this is how you can learn even with LLMs, or learn in parallel with LLMs being there. But there are going to be these skills you need to be able to navigate the world as it is. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Just very short, because we are, I think, over time already. But both on the responsible or irresponsible use and on the data sets. I just, on the case of the African Union, I have less to say. But two observations. The first one is maybe a very obvious one. I'm old. I have been a long time in AI. I've been working in AI for 40 years. And I have seen many different ways of approaching AI. What we are doing nowadays is, in a sense, a very lazy way of doing AI. We are expecting that if we put more data and we get more computational power, then all our problems will be solved. I think that it's time now, and I call on all of you, the youth and the African country which is the most rich in youth of the world, we are in need of a new AI paradigm. One that doesn't require all the data of the world to be put in one pile, to be cannibalized and misused by all kinds of organizations. One that doesn't need all the energy and all the natural resources of the world to be turned into the machines that we need to deal with that data, but one which is able to combine different approaches, to join together, to build from small blocks, small different blocks, small approaches, different understandings of the world, and putting it all together in a network, in a unity of the diversity of all these type of things. I believe that we can do it, or that you can do it. I cannot anymore. My time is kind of done. But I believe that this is what we need to move forward in AI. And I do truly believe that you guys there are the ones who are going to lead the world on showing how can we build AI in a completely different way, one which ensures the ethical, the responsibility, the diversity, the inclusion of all the many different voices, all the many different approaches to understanding what AI is. Doesn't mean that we don't need the data sets, but it's a completely different approach and an understanding of how to address these data sets. I think it's also the responsible way to move forward in education, is not just being afraid that ChatGPT is replacing our teachers, replacing our understanding by the students, but much more understand what is it that we want the students to know. What does knowledge and insight means is just by being able to answer every question. We don't really have the insights that are needed to move forward and to really apply it in many different contexts. So I think that by looking at AI from a completely different way and maybe taking away, and I know that I'm in a deep learning environment, but maybe looking at a different way, which is a more pluralistic and diverse, we will be able to address many of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. We are coming to the end of the panel, and I would like to request each of the panelists to give us a parting shot. Make it 30 seconds, so make it short and sweet. Give us a vision of AI policy that you would want to see in your closing remarks. Thank you. Start with Vokosi. I saw Barbara thinking, so let's start with
Yeah, I think one of the things I had asked, I think somebody had asked me earlier about like how do you move into the policy space? And I said like, oh yeah, I think Barbara should explain like, to people in the room why some of us, and maybe a small percentage of us in the room should move into being an expert, still being your scientist, but then also engaging with policymakers. The space I really hope for is that one where there's open doors. I took on, like, in some ways, whether people will think I'm dumb or not, I want to be available to policymakers at any time through a WhatsApp call, through a call, and even private tutoring to explain what is these technologies and what is going on, because they're making decisions at the moment where I believe there's influence that I think Yassine was saying, like, I think that's one of the things that you are alluding to, that there's influence that is coming in from it that is not really allowing a discussion of what is going on within the local ecosystem, what are the needs, and what are the opportunities. So the perfect space, like, my ideal is that we have that. We have this area where experts in area, not just AI, can engage with policymakers, and there's a two-way street of people taking the time to learn from each other, respect each other's work, and then move keep on moving society towards being much better and better. I think that's my, yeah.
Thank you. I think my parting words will be maybe leveraging on what Vukosi just said, is to get more actors into the room. Sometimes we assume that staying away from policy making would save us the stress and then things will just go. But what you don't realize is that when you stay away, the policies are going to be made and it will impact you. So, deal with the bureaucracy, because when you come to policy making, there's a lot of bureaucracy and lots of slow responses, but don't leave it to chance. Be more active in the space when we give our calls for experts or inputs into draft papers. Currently on our table, we are working with Eswatini to develop their national AI strategy. So if you're here from Eswatini, give me a shout out, let me connect you to the people. Be more active in some of those development spaces. As Vukosi has mentioned, I would also want to reiterate that to ensure that you are shaping the future that we want to see Africa as. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think that the policy I would like to see happening is one which recognizes and incentivizes the many different ways that as researchers, as academics, as developers, you can engage and can be recognized. It's not just about writing papers, it's about engaging with policy, it's engaging with your communities, it's developing curriculum, it's teaching. So there are many different ways, and we tend to only measure quality of research by the papers that we produce, but there are many more important ways of engaging and showing the quality of our research, and I think that we need to see much more policies that support this type of diversity in the engagement between research, policymakers and industries.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our panel. Please join me in saying a big thank you to the panelists, please. Thank you very much. And to the hosts, I also want to say again, thank you very much. To you, the audience, for those who are asked the questions, I think the message is clear. Engage, talk. When you're done talking, keep talking and continue engaging. Let your voices be heard. This is the opportunity for you to speak up about the kind of future, the digital future you want to have. So for me, again, is to say thank you. I also want to say mwirire. I think that's what they say here. Sarai Zavanaka. Sorry, I had picked this up somewhere. But all this is to say asante sana and kwaheri. Goodbye. Thank you very much.